Looking for a fun way to win up to 25 times your money this football season? Test your skills on Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projection for a wide variety of statistics, and place your entry. It's as easy as that. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and an enormous selection of players and stat options are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Ready to test your skills? Join the Prize Picks community of more than 7 million football fans who have already signed up. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit up to $100. Just visit prizepicks.com/get100 and use code GET100. That's code GET100 at prizepicks.com/get100 for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy.
You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
I'm wondering if you'd go wandering with me through the wilderness and woods, where the winds are blowing free, through the darkness of the night.
Welcome to the Jester Section Hiker Podcast, where we talk about the continual pursuit of the section hiker.
And I'll spread the word, and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come, and we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, head over the river and through the woods.
Welcome back to Jester Section Hiker, the premier podcast with the spotlight on section hikers. I'm your host, Julie Jester Gayhart, and this is the podcast where you will hear stories about everyday people who, in addition to their everyday lives, make the commitment to hike long-distance trails where every section is a new beginning. Before I introduce you to today's guest, I wanted to share with you some additional things I have going on amid the COVID-19 pandemic. I am going live on Instagram at 9 a.m. Eastern Time on Mondays and Fridays for the month of April with various guests. You can find out more information about that over on my Instagram at Jester Hikes. You can also follow the Hiking Radio Network on Instagram at Hiking Radio Network. And remember, tag us in your Instagram post using the hashtag HRNSpreadPositivity. The episode you're about to hear was recorded before the coronavirus really took hold of our nation. Our guest, like a lot of us, has had to reschedule section hikes and has been treated not so nice on hiking social media sites. Going forward, life as we knew it will more than likely not be the same. But for my guest and his words about the hiking community at the end of this episode, I hope will continue to be the same and be one of the major reasons we all continue to be kind to one another. In our Let's Talk Gear portion of the show, Steve Kammeyer finally reveals his gear list. Thanks for joining me today, and now on to the show. Welcome back to the Jester Section Hiker Podcast. I'm your host, Julie Jester Gayhart, and this is the podcast where we talk about the continual pursuit of the section hiker and what it takes to complete a trail section by section. On today's episode, we are going to be talking to Brad Fulton, aka Old School, about his section hiking pursuit of the Pacific Crest Trail. Brad is a retired educator, but says now he's working more than ever. Brad talks to us about how he got started section hiking the PCT, his style of section hiking, and why he's section hiking the PCT versus through hiking. I look forward to all of you hearing from Brad. Welcome to the podcast, Brad.
Thanks. Good to be here, Julie.
Good to have you on. We'll just go ahead and get started. I'm always interested in hearing about how our guests first hear about the trails they're section hiking. Talk to the listeners a little bit how you first heard about the Pacific Crest Trail.
Well, probably when I was about a freshman or sophomore. My parents bought me a book. It was by Colin Fletcher called The 1,000-Mile Summer, and he was kind of the father of American long-distance backpacking. And I got sold, and the next year they bought me Eric Ryback's High Adventure. He was the first person to hike the PCT when it wasn't even a trail. He was journaling and for the Forest Service so that they would know the trail's route. And I decided then, it's probably about my junior year, that I was going to hike it as soon as I graduated high school. So I started saving my money and went out and bought a 1973 Kelty backpack and decided that's what I was going to do. What I was going to do when I graduated. And way leads on to way. Discovered girls and other things and spent all my money and ended up going to college instead. And then
Brad, you're not supposed to admit that. You're not supposed to admit that.
Yeah, it's so the plan fell through, and it's kind of good that it did, because at the time there wasn't a lot known about the trail. There wasn't a lot of support for it. I think Eric Ryback did the entire trail with 5 resupplies.
Wow. And I've actually tried to look for that book, because I know in your and I's initial conversation, and that book, if you go on Amazon, that thing is about $75. Yep. So I'm assuming it's out of print. It's not printed anymore. So if any of you listeners out there have that book, I'm willing to pay good money for it, maybe not $75. So, because I'd love to read it. I love reading about the first person that hiked the trails. So how long was it after you read those 2 particular books, after you got interested in girls and all that wonderful thing? How long was it until you actually started section hiking?
Probably about 40 years. And it's kind of good that I didn't do it then, because my plan, Eric hiked it from north to south. My plan was to do the opposite and go northbound on it. So I would have hit the trail in the desert in June of a drought year if I had done what I had planned. The vultures would probably be just picking the last of the jerky off my bones by now.
Yeah, that's what I was getting ready to say. Yeah. That's the month you're not supposed to start, right?
I didn't know anything, and nope, there was nothing written about it. So that's just was my plan. I was going to start in Mexico and hike north starting in the summer, and that wouldn't have worked at all. So I backpacked through the years, got married, had a family, and the idea never left me, but I also never felt like I was willing to sacrifice 5 months with my family for that trail.
Right.
The last few years, my kids are grown. So during the summer, back about 3 years ago, I decided I'd go out and knock off a section, about a 120-mile section. So I loaded up my 40-pound backpack and headed out on section N, which starts in the Feather River Canyon and goes to Lassen Park.
Okay, so where is the Feather River Canyon? Just so for the listeners, I'm assuming that's in...
Yeah, just south of the halfway point.
Okay.
This hike would have covered the halfway point of the trail. So school got out, and I put on my backpack and started hiking, and you started at a 2,000-foot elevation. By that afternoon, I was at 6,500 feet and standing on 4 feet of snow.
What month was that?
June, first week of June of a wet year. So typically people would hit that section probably in late June, early July. So I'm looking at my maps, and I realize I have to gain another 1,000 to 1,500 feet in elevation over the course of this hike, and I'm already on 4 feet of snow. And I'm good with map and compass, so I knew exactly where I was, but I also knew that there was no way I was going to be able to hike that trail and finish it in the time. And even the creeks I was crossing were just raging. So, and I was hiking alone.
Now, were you prepared for that beforehand? Were you prepared?
No.
Did you have like snow clothes? I say snow clothes, but warmer clothes and...
Yeah, I slept on the snow that night, and I slept warm. I had probably, for a 5-day hike, I probably had 10 days worth of food. You know, if I needed to pace it out, I could have.
Right. What about your gear? Did you have like the traditional, 65 pounds of gear? I mean, were you pretty much equipped?
About 40 pounds at that point.
So how many miles did you actually make? So was that in 2017?
I think so. Yeah. It was 2017. So I got about 15 miles in. Still had about 100 miles to go on this thing. I thought there's no way I'm going to make this 100 miles in a week. My wife will be wondering why I'm not at the takeout. So I thought I'm not lost. I know where I am. There's no way to hike this thing. So I knew I had to get off the trail. And
right.
Like I say, I'm good with map and compass, and I knew there's a town about 40 miles west. So I thought, well, if I start hiking west, I'll eventually get to that town or somebody's house or something.
Yeah, something will happen. So you said you were good with a map and compass. Mm-hmm. And this intrigues me because for the most part, on the East Coast, when you're hiking the Appalachian Trail, most people are using gut hook, right, and most people are not carrying paper maps anymore. So tell us how you ended up, getting yourself off that mountain and orienteering yourself down since you realized the snow and everything.
I didn't even know about the gut hook app at that point. I mean, again, I'm kind of naive and I'm hiking alone. So I just put on my backpack and took off. I had the half-mile maps, which are a really good set of paper maps of the PCT. The only problem was all they show is the PCT. They don't show anything larger. So on the section I was on, off in the far corner of the map, I saw a little tiny piece of a logging road. So I just took a bearing with my compass and headed about 3 miles through the uncharted forest. And I found that logging road. And I thought, well, I'll hike downhill to get out of the mountains. And I went downhill about a mile or two, and the road dead ended. So I turned around and hiked.
Oh, wow.
Turned around and hiked the other direction. And about a mile or so, I hit a second logging road that was much better condition. I started hiking downhill on that one. And about a mile down the road, I saw a sign, and I knew exactly where I was. I'd been on the road before when I was in high school.
Right.
And I was about 40 miles from the town that I was going to go for. So I just started walking down the road. A truck pulled up, and he said, "Are you on the PCT?" And I said, "Well, I was." And he said, "Well, do you want a beer?" And it turns out he worked for Sierra Nevada Brewing, and he had a nice chest full of every flavor in the back, and he let me have a beer. And I drank the beer.
Well,
and
Brad,
sat
you
there.
lucked out.
I did. And then I sat there and thought, okay, I'm going to start walking back to this town, and I'll call for a ride when I get there. And I stuck my thumb out, and a car pulls up, and he says, "Where are you headed?" And I said, "Well, I'm trying to get to this town, but I'm from Reading." And he says, "Well, I'm going to Reading. Hop in." And 2 hours later, I was sitting at home.
Well, Brad, we always talk about, honestly, I mean, that is no better story than the trail provides.
Yeah.
I mean, when it comes down to it, the trail does provide. So
A beer
what
and
do
a
you
ride
think you
home.
would have done? Yeah, beer and a ride home. I don't know how you can beat that. Since you knew the area and you kind of knew that road, what do you think you would have done if you didn't have, the paper map?
Yeah, about 10 miles down the road, there's a little mountain community. There was a phone there, and there's people there, and that's where I eventually caught the ride that took me home. Was just outside of that community. So I knew where I was. I knew that I could let my wife know, "Hey, I'm off the trail, but I'm okay. Come down when you can and pick me up. I'll find a hotel and I'll be by the swimming pool. That kind of thing." So
yeah, the beer truck picked me up. I'm just fine.
I'm fine. Yeah. So that was my first year, and I had 15 miles. It was all I got.
Okay, so I know when you and I originally chatted, I know that didn't sit well with you. So did you plan to go back out that same, summer, or did you wait for another year?
And the rest of my summer was booked. My summers get really busy. So I planned it for the next year, and I took the next section up, which would be section O. And that's an 80-mile piece. And I did that in just under 4 days. And by then my pack was probably down to about 30 pounds, 35, something like that.
So it seems like you learned quite a bit from that original section. I mean, you had a lot happen to you in 15 miles. I mean, you learned weather patterns and how to get off a road and how to orient yourself.
And I've done some of that before.
Maybe,
In my backpacking, I live near Lassen National Park, and I go up there all the time and just hike off trail and practice with my compass. So I've done a lot of that. I know how to get myself out of a situation. I've been times where the map was wrong and it told me I was in one place and I wasn't, but I knew how to orienteer out of it. So that part didn't frighten me. I wasn't concerned when I was stuck on the snow that time. My biggest concern was once I decided I have to leave the trail, I'm hiking on snow down canyons and it's kind of icy. I thought if I fall and break a leg or something, no one's going to even know where to start looking. So I got to be really careful. But the second year I went out and did an 80-mile stretch, and I finished it in about 3.5 days. And I was really pumped about that. Still didn't know about the app. I was carrying map and compass. And I met a lot of thru hikers that year because I'd done some research and found out when are these thru hikers going to be on that section. And I timed my section hike with them. So I saw a lot of hikers, and they taught me a lot, and I learned a lot. And so this year I went out and knocked off the next section, P, which is 100 miles. And I used the app for that, and it worked really well. I still carry the paper map, still carry the compass, because, if you drop your phone and break it, you got to have something.
You got to have something. And that's one thing, that I want to stress to people as well, is that it's always good. And I know people don't want to carry the extra weight, but you got to have something accessible besides your phone, because my phone's gotten wet and it stopped working. I've dropped it. It stopped working. Battery. It seems something always happened. Yeah. Battery, whatever. So
I carry the compass on me at all times. I wear it around my neck so that if I set my pack down and anything happens, like just on my body, I'm carrying matches, I'm carrying water tablets or a purifier, and I'm carrying a compass. So I could live with what I'm carrying on me in a survival situation.
And that's smart. So let's go back a little bit. So it sounds like you've learned quite a bit from your 2017, 2018, and even your next section of what you like to carry in your pack and how your gear is set up. And I know that's very important to you because your first pack weighed about 40 pounds and now you're down to about a 10-pound base weight. Is that correct?
Yeah, just under 10. I'm running about an 8 to a 9, depending. Like if I'm going to go out and knock off a full section of 100 miles, I'm looking at about a 9 or 10 pound base weight. I did a couple of hikes this year where I was only going 50 miles and I was sub 9 on those.
Nice. And I know you've spent a lot of time researching gear, studying what works best for you. So I'm going to ask you a couple different things and just expand on it for us a little bit. So stove and fuel, what do you use for your stove and your fuel?
My wife bought me a backpacking stove a few years ago, so I traded in that heavy one for that, and that helped. That one eventually broke, so I went on YouTube and saw what's called a penny stove that's made out of a beer can. And I made one and tested it.
Okay, yeah, I call that a cat stove.
It's very similar, yeah. The cat stove made out of a cat food can. It works on a similar principle. And that stove weighs an ounce. I made a windscreen out of some aluminum. And with my titanium mug, you're looking at about maybe a 3-ounce cook kit, 3 or 4 ounces.
And what fuel are you using with that stove?
I go to the Dollar Tree and buy the gasoline treatment. It comes in a yellow bottle.
Love it.
It's called Heat is the brand name, but there's other brands too. The things will run on gasoline additive. They'll run on alcohol. They'll run on moonshine. So you can, if you're having to resupply, you can.
All right, Brad, you have me at moonshine. I'm good. I'm going with the cat stove.
Well, why waste moonshine on a stove?
Well, that is true.
So I built that out of a soda can, and then I was looking at it one day, and I thought, I like to drink those little V8 cans of tomato juice. And I thought, that's even smaller. So now I built one out of that, and it weighs a half an ounce for my stove.
Brad, what are you cooking on that thing? Because that seems way too small. But hey, convince me. What are your meals?
It's just the stove, and then what I do is I have a sheet of aluminum. I'll probably make a YouTube video of this at some point about how I do it. In fact, one of my my most recent YouTube video where I did the 50-mile stretch on Hat Creek Rim shows the stove and how it works. I just took a piece of aluminum about 3 or 4 inches tall. It's in a curve. I drilled some holes through it, and I took 2 aluminum tent stakes and shoved them through there. And that's the grill on which my cup sits. So that's a windscreen and cup support, and then the stove just sits under it. And because of the windscreen, it's very efficient. I can boil water in under 2 minutes, maybe an ounce of fuel a day, because I only cook dinner. I don't cook any other times. So I'm looking at an ounce of fuel and a whole, let's see, I have it here on my spreadsheet. My entire kitchen, my stove is 1.7 ounces with the windscreen and the base and everything else. 1.7 ounces. And then I go through about an ounce to an ounce and a half of fuel a day.
Wow. You would crack up if you saw what I had. So we'll just move on from
I
that.
had a Coleman single burner that you had to pump up. It was made of solid steel. It weighed about
oh my goodness
5 or 6 pounds for the stove.
Wow. Okay. That's a little more than what I have, Brad.
Yeah. There was no windscreen on it. So if it was windy, you weren't even boiling water with it. You were just getting it lukewarm.
All right. This next one I have for you, I about died laughing because we were talking about a sleeping bag. You went from a sleeping bag to a quilt. And you said your sleeping bag was like the jaws of life trying to get you out of the bag. So talk to us about why you went to a quilt.
I don't know why it is, but I cannot sleep. I cannot fall asleep laying on my back. So when I had a mummy bag, I'd get into the thing on my back and pull everything around. I've got no hair, so I've got to have something over my head. So I'd pull that around my head, and then I'd roll on my side. And part of the bag would come with me, and part of it wouldn't. And then during the night, I'd get sore, and I'd flip over on the other side, and part of the bag would come with me. And on that, by the morning, I looked like a twisted old piece of juniper or something like that, or a piece of driftwood. And it was just. I'd wake up in the middle of the night all scrunched up, and it was like I was tied with ropes. This thing was wound so tightly around me. So then I kept hearing about quilts, and I thought, well, I'm a side sleeper, and I heard they're really good for side sleepers. So I bought one, and tried it out on some mild hikes where the temperature wasn't that cold, because you've got nothing under you with a quilt except your sleeping pad. I loved it. I was completely warm. When I turned on my side or on my stomach or rolled on my back for any reason, it just stayed in place. It was great. So I'm sold now. I
think it's awesome.
Yeah. I took it out in October on a hike where it was going to get down to about 30 degrees, maybe a little colder. I wanted to see if it would keep me warm. It's rated for 30. I took it out, and I was okay with it.
Nice. I have caught a lot of heat for not going to a quilt yet. So between you and our gear guy, Steve, I think you guys have convinced me. So let's talk about your base layers and what you're using for base layers and just regular hiking clothes.
Yeah, I got a set. I hike usually in long nylon pants, kind of like those ones that have the zip-off legs on them, except mine aren't zip-offs, but just long nylon pants. My shirt is a long sleeve collared shirt. I spent a lot of time in the sun when I was younger, so I have to watch how much sun I get on my skin. So I wear long pants, long sleeve shirts, and I've gotten used to that, where I actually feel cooler in a long sleeve shirt than I do in a t-shirt where sun is hitting my skin. So I'm wearing a synthetic shirt, synthetic pants, some good Darn Tough socks, and my hiking shoes, and then I'll wear a buff for my head just to keep the sun off my head.
Now, are you a trail runner guy or a boot guy?
Trail runners.
Okay. Yeah. All right. And then you don't, I'm assuming you don't have multiple outfits, right?
Nope. No, it gets pretty right by the end of the week.
Okay.
So then I'll hike until bedtime, and, but then my clothes are all sweaty and everything. So I'll put on a very thin base layer, like a synthetic base layer shirt. I'll change my underwear, put on some dry socks, and get in bed that way. Usually I leave my pants on. So that also helps the rating of that quilt quite a bit. I sleep in my base layers. And then when I get up in the morning, I'm usually up before the sun, hiking by headlamp. So I keep the base layer on. Once the sun comes up and it gets warm, I take it off and put back on the cooler clothes for the rest of the day. So I'm always sleeping in dry clothes.
Nice. And that's important. And one of the reasons I wanted to have you talk about your gear setup is because you've learned that makes you more of an efficient hiker, because when you're out there section hiking, you want to get in a certain amount of miles.
Right.
So talk us through a typical hiking day for you out there on the trail.
Well, at my age, section hiking has a finite limit on it. I've got to get this done before I'm 70, So I'm trying to get a
hey,
lot
listen,
of
there's
done.
A lot of 70-year-olds out there.
Yeah, but I want to make sure that I do this before anything else falls apart. So I get up in the morning. Usually I'm in bed by 8:30 or 9, and I've hiked enough miles that I fall right to sleep, which means I'm waking up between 3 and 4 in the morning. If the weather was clear when I went to bed, I just cowboy camp. I don't put up a tarp or a tent or anything. I don't even carry a tent. I just carry a tarp in case it does rain. So in the morning, I break camp in 15 minutes. I don't eat breakfast. I just put everything away, put on my headlamp, and start walking. So I can get in 4 miles by the time the sun comes up. And then around 8 or so, I will stop. When the air has gotten a little warmer, I'll stop and eat breakfast. And that's usually a cold breakfast. It's often a baggie with oatmeal in it, or granola, some scoops of powdered milk, some nuts are in there, some chia seeds, maybe some dried fruit. So I throw some water in there, stir it up in the baggie, and eat my breakfast. So I haven't had to fire up my stove. I don't have any dishes to wash. So breakfast is only 15 minutes or 20 minutes, and I'm back on the trail. And it's a really hearty breakfast, too. It really sits in there nicely. And then I hike until around 10 or 11, and then I start snacking. I don't stop for lunch. I just put snacks in my hip belt pockets, and I'll snack. And I learned that from a thru hiker on the AT that said if she had to do it again, she wouldn't take a lunch. She wouldn't stop and cook lunch.
Okay.
So I tried that, and I really like that system, because you're constantly putting calories back in as you're burning them. So I snack from about 10 o'clock till 2 or 3, and then I'll hike for a few more hours. And around 5 or 6, if there's a water source, I'll stop and cook my dinner. And that's the only time I cook. As far as coffee goes, I'll either have my coffee then, or if I wanted it sooner, I'll drink it cold. So the only meal I'm cooking is dinner. And then afterwards, I'll wash the dishes there and then get back on the trail and hike till 8 or so that by the time I camp, I'm not camped where I ate food.
Gotcha.
So I don't have the scent of food around my camp.
And then kind of a rinse and repeat. So when you're out there, you kind of it sounds like you get yourself in a rhythm and it works for you.
Yeah. So I knock off between 25 and 30 miles a day that way.
Nice. Let's go back a little bit. Let's just review before we move forward. So started section hiking in 2017, got 15 miles and almost, got stuck in the snow, got yourself off the trail. By the time 2018 came around, you refined your gear. You figured out what kind of hiker you were. What section did you hike in 2019?
Section P. So I've now done
Section P. Okay.
Sections, N, O, and P, which takes me from just below the halfway point almost to the Oregon border. So next year I plan to fill in that and do Oregon. And then this spring I'm going to be down in the Mojave Desert area doing some work. So I'm going to try to knock off a section or two in the desert when I'm down there if I can.
Nice. So how many total miles of the Pacific Crest Trail is that at this point?
I've done 330. If I am able to hike all the sections I plan to do this year, I'll be just maybe a little over 1,000.
Perfect. So let's get into why you choose to section hike versus through hike, because I know that you are a retired educator now, and you and I chatted, you're doing a lot of different contract work and things like that. So why do you still choose to section hike?
I never have 5 months without work. I mean, I could choose not to take jobs because all my work is independent now. I could just say, I'm not taking any jobs from April till September. But that's when I make a lot of my income. And I'm okay with section hiking. It's interesting because my original desire was to through hike that trail. Now that I'm section hiking it, the desire is to complete the trail. The idea of through hiking it is appealing, but not nearly as appealing as saying I did it.
Right. And when you get that certificate in the mail from the Pacific Crest Trail Association, just like the Appalachian Trail Conservancy, it says you are a completer of the trail.
Yeah. That's fine with me.
Yeah.
And I may change once I'm done. I was talking to my son a while back. He accompanied me on one of my section hikes this year, and he really enjoyed it. And he said, even if he section hiked it, he would want to go back and through hike it someday. Like you were talking last week in your podcast with a woman that did that. She'd section hike it and then wanted to go back and through hike it. And that bug may bite me at some point. I don't know. But at this point,
right.
I'm quite content to say I'm going to try to nail this trail down piece by piece.
Right. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's tons of people out there section hiking and doing that. And in life, I mean, people have jobs, people have families, obligations. And like yourself, you may have retired from education, but you're still consulting, you're still working, you've still got obligations, but you're still putting in that time on the trail. So I think it's great. So we're in 2020. And what's the plans for this hiking season?
As I said, I want to try to do Oregon. I'm going to try to do that in one piece. I'm going to try to take about 3 weeks and do all of Oregon. That'd be a 20-mile day average. So I've blocked out the end of July and the month of August so that I can work with whatever the weather looks like in there as far as the snow loads go here, because they vary so much from year to year on the West Coast. One year you might be fine hiking that in July. Another year you might have to wait till September for those trails to be open. So I've left about a 5-week window in there to do Oregon. In March and April, I'll be down in Southern California, and I'd like to nail a couple of desert sections in the spring if I can arrange the transportation of the trailheads. I'm not very close to the trailheads, but if I can figure out a way to get to those, I'm going to try to take out about 100 or 200 miles of the desert this year too.
Well, I'll connect you with, I don't know if you know Patrick Murphy. He's a former guest of the podcast. He lives in San Diego. So how close is that section, what you want to do, to San Diego?
4 hours.
Okay. So he may not be the one, but he may know somebody because he's familiar with that area. So I'll put you in contact with him. But, and you also, I also want to mention that not only do you hike the Pacific Crest Trail, but you also like to go out in some different wilderness areas around your house. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. I live in a wonderful place. I mean, Lassen National Park is 35 miles from my house. Lassen Park would be like a pocket-sized version of Yellowstone.
Oh, nice.
The park motto is the one and lonely. It's one of the least visited national parks. And it's stunningly beautiful. We have a 10,000-foot volcano there. There's probably 30 or 40 volcanoes in the park. There's meadows, there's creeks, there's waterfalls. It's just amazing country. And 90% of the park is wilderness area. Bordering it on the east is another wilderness area. To the north of it is another wilderness area that I backpacked. We have Castle Craigs, an hour north by Mount Shasta. And then we have the Trinity Alps wilderness area. I'm just right in the middle of about probably a half a dozen really great backpacking places where a person could spend their whole life exploring. The Marble Mountain Wilderness, Yoloboli Wilderness, Russian Wilderness. Those are all right here in my neighborhood.
Wow. You're going to have to stop because I'm getting extremely jealous. So, so listen, got a couple questions that I want to ask you. I've had some listeners reach out to me and say, hey, why don't you ask your guest these particular questions? So I decided I was going to. So I'm calling this little questionnaire or question section, the questions the listeners want to know. Yeah. So the first question is, what is your one luxury item?
Well, it depends. If I'm on just a recreational hike, I'll take a chair. But when I'm section hiking, I don't carry much in the way of luxury. So I've thought a lot about this question. Does an inflatable pillow count as luxury?
Yes, I'm counting that as a luxury item because I've just actually added that back in. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I think as you get older, you decide sleeping on your smelly clothes is not necessarily something you want to do.
I don't see the pillow as a luxury item. I can't sleep without that. I got to have my neck elevated, especially being a side sleeper, you know. My neck.
Well, Brad, that's a luxury to have your neck elevated.
Okay. To me, it's survival, but.
All right. So
I would say probably just my pillow is the only thing in there that's superfluous and isn't actually going to keep me alive.
All right. Perfect. Second question. Favorite trail food?
Black licorice.
Oh.
Yeah. See, I don't have to share it. Nobody wants to share it with me. I can have it all.
That is true. Very true.
Yeah. I've always loved it, and I carry it in my hip belt pockets, and it's part of my lunchtime snack, and it's such a treat each day to have that black licorice.
Very good. Well, I won't be asking you for any of that, so that is definitely going to be your favorite. All right. Question number 3. What is something that you failed at and learned from while hiking?
I failed at quite a bit of things, you know, through the years. Like I was carrying a 3-pound bear canister, and
oh my God,
there's very few places in the trail out here where you have to have it. Lassen Park near me is one of the places you're required to carry it, so I just assumed you had to carry it everywhere. You know, cutting weight. I think that probably the thing that I learned most was this: even though I hike solo, you're not really hiking alone. You're part of a community. And I've learned so much from the fellow hikers that I've been with at hostels and on the trail. You know, I call myself old school because I started this with a 1973 Kelty backpack. I was on the trail with that backpack that I had from high school. And the very first person I passed on a section hiker was an old gray-haired guy like me. And he goes, "Wow, that's old school," when he saw the backpack. So I've since cut the pack, its weight itself. I've gone to a more comfortable pack and, you know, using apps instead of paper map, cutting the weight of the stove, learning how to utilize the resources along the trail and that kind of thing. So I've learned so much from the community of hikers that are out there. And that's probably the thing that's been best is I went into this thinking I'm doing this alone. And I was hiking alone. I was sleeping at night alone, but you're part of a community. It's almost, you know, I've never been in the military, but I picture it kind of that way. You're working together for a common goal and for a common good.
That is so true. I really, really love the hiking community, and no better way to turn this over to you, Brad. So now we've come to the point in the podcast where the guest is going to sign off for us by reading their own journal entry, a statement or a quote that will inspire us to keep hiking section by section.
Okay, so I don't journal on the trail, but I do have this, and this is something we've talked about before. You know, I'm so appreciative that you're doing this, making section hikers more aware of what's available out there on the trail. When I was a kid, my dad was a banker, and he was a staunch Republican. Our neighbor was a Union Democrat, and they got together every night, smoked cigarettes, played cards, and talked politics, and they were the best of friends. And that's something we've lost in our culture today. nowadays on social media, if somebody doesn't agree 100% with you, the two parties demonize one another. And I don't know why that is. But when I'm on the trail, aside from the beauty of the wilderness and the accomplishment of the experience of hiking it, the thing I most appreciate is the community. I'm very different than most of the hikers I meet. I'm 63, they're 19 or 20 or 21. And I'm sure my values and their values are different, my interests and their interests, but we're part of the same community and we get along and we work together. And I would love to see more people shut down their social media and pick up their backpacks and get out on the trail for that reason.
Hey, Brad, I really, really appreciate it. I really appreciate you joining us on the podcast. And I'm definitely going to have you back on because I feel like when you finish Oregon this summer, we're going to have more to talk about.
All righty. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Julie.
Thanks for chatting with us on the podcast, Brad. I'm really glad you were able to get yourself off that mountain on your first section hike. I'm not sure about that black licorice, but the beer and the ride home worked out great. Brad has reminded us during this interview that there is nothing like the hiking community. We may think we're hiking solo, but we are far from being alone. Next up, we have Let's Talk Gear with Steve Kameyer as we continue our talks about gear. Welcome back to Let's Talk Gear with Steve Kameyer. On this episode, Steve is going to share with us what I am going to call Steve's gear list and some alternatives. Steve has put together a list of gear that will work for anyone that is just getting started backpacking, or for those of you that are looking to upgrade maybe some of your gear. So we'll get right to it. Welcome back to the podcast, Steve.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. Always fun.
Really appreciate it. And actually really looking forward to this episode. I know you have spent some time putting together your particular gear in particular, and we're going for it. We're going to put a list together. We're going to have you explain it. And I want everybody to keep in mind that these are the major items that, you're going to carry on, any given trip, and not your single personal items that you might add to your pack. So, all right, Steve, let's get going. Let's talk about the pack itself first.
Sure. This is all going to be fun. This is going to be a fun one today. So you just keep those questions coming as fast as possible. We'll just do some kind of like rapid fire thing here.
We're going for it.
Let's just do it. I mean, personally, anybody who knows me knows that I have carried specifically and 100% solely ULA packs for the last 4 years now, maybe even five years. Maybe it's sad to say, maybe I'm proud to say, but I actually own every single model of ULA backpack that they offer. And believe it or not, I can find uses for all of them. ULA is just an absolutely wonderful company. The price might be a little bit high right off the bat, but truly they're not very much higher than any other of the major cottage manufacturers are right now. So, and then of course they have the lifetime warranty and the free pack tune-ups and just amazing customer service. The quality is on par with like museum quality. So you just really cannot go wrong with that. If you're not looking at ULA, Hyperlite is another awesome manufacturer to go with. And I mean, I'm really glad to say that even some of the major brands like maybe Osprey have kind of stepped up their game over the last couple of years, and they are now offering ultralight packs with just enough frame to get the job done, as opposed to a frame that will carry 70 pounds, even if you're only carrying 30 pounds. That's where your folks end up in that little predicament where they're carrying 2-3 pounds of pack weight in their actual backpack that they don't really need to do because they're carrying too much frame. So yeah, ULA, Hyperlite leading the way these days. Excellent choices either way.
Perfect. And what is your go-to for, let's just say, a week out on the trail, 2 weeks out on the trail? Which ULA pack are you going for?
Well, again, and this is going all the way back to episode number 1. With ULA, there's a little bit of a different thinking about which pack you need. It's not necessarily the capacity of the pack, because all ULA packs come with a roll top design, which means you might be looking at a pack that has a 75 liter maximum capacity, but that pack can roll down and fit around a 35 liter load and actually compress around a 30 or 35 liter load just as well as a 30 or 35 liter pack would. So really, what the whole deal here is, and once you get into these ultralight backpacks, which is, of course, the new age, and that's the way everybody is gearing towards now, it's all about the total amount of weight that you are carrying. If I'm just out for a few days, I can keep myself 25 pounds or under. That is total 100%. That's all my gear, all my food, my fuel, my water, everything. If I can keep it under 25 pounds, I go with the ULA Ohm. If I'm anywhere between 25 and 35 pounds, which might happen if I'm on a week-long trip where I have to carry a few extra pounds worth of food, and maybe if there's a shortage of water along the way, so I'm carrying an extra few pounds worth of water too, you can definitely find me in the ULA circuit, which is ULA's number one selling pack as far as numbers go. And it is just an amazing pack for the money and for the weight and for what it does for you. It's just super cool. So yeah, more often than not, you'll find me in either the ULA Ohm or the circuit.
Perfect. And I'm a ULA circuit fan and a ULA Photon fan. That
yes.
Yeah. The Photon I purchased from you before we even started the podcast. I mean, I did the whole, I don't even know. It was like all black on black, like even black lettering, the X-Pack material, like you hooked me up. So thank you for that. And I carry that thing cool. Everywhere.
And like yourself, I mean, like I said, you bought that pack before you and I even really knew each other before we started this. I also owned my first couple of ULA packs before I got involved with ULA as a retailer for them. And I just absolutely fell in love with the product, the customer service, the warranty, everything else that they have going for them. And fortunately, at the time, I was living just about an hour away from the shop. So I had a chance to kind of drop in, say, hey, and the rest is history, I guess you could say. So now I sell ULA packs like it's nothing. So yes, I love it very, very much.
All right, let's move on to the tent.
Let's do it. Oh, okay. We have a few different options here. And this is going to be, these are all tents that I absolutely love. I completely 100% believe in. We're going to start with the tent that I am personally using this year on the trail. And I do have a couple of long distance hikes planned for this year. As long as I'm staying below like 8,000 feet, I will be using the Nemo Hornet 2-person tent. And I'm using the new 2019, 2020 version. I absolutely love it. There are a couple of features on this tent that I'm not sure I could ever live without again. Between the cut fly, which a person like myself, I sleep very, very hot. So having a fly that's actually cut on the ends allows for a little bit more airflow. And that's just a great thing for those of us who are very warm sleepers, especially down here in the South, where it does get a little bit warm and the nights stay hot and muggy. Also, this new, I guess I want to call it a crossbar spacer. This is an absolute industry first. There is a piece of plastic that attaches to the bar. It's super light, it's super durable, and it gives you a lot more room. It just kind of opens everything up. I'm extremely stoked about the new Nemo Hornet, and I'm looking forward to putting that thing through the paces over the coming months for sure. Anything else that goes along with that, I am also a big Agnes fan. And the Copper Spur, probably the number one tent sold in the last decade, honestly. The Copper Spur is just an absolutely amazing tent. A couple things that I really like about this tent. A, it is super stupid light. Absolutely love that part of it. B, it is a completely freestanding tent, meaning it's always recommended to use tent stakes, but if you weren't in a position to use tent stakes, your tent will still stand up. And as long as your body and all your gear is in there to hold it down, it's not going to blow away on you because it is super light. But there is a couple of, I don't want to say bad things about this, but the material is very, very thin. So you definitely want to take care of your tent in that aspect. You don't want to be camping under trees where you might have some fallen limbs during the nighttime because that will destroy a tent very, very quick. The one good thing about the Copper Spur, and the one thing that I personally use on almost every single tent, is a side entry tent. I'm a pretty big guy. I'm 6'1", 200 pounds. I don't really like to do the whole hands and knees and crawl into the end of a tent, which is what we would be doing on the next tent real quick. The Big Agnes Fly Creek. Again, one of the top 3 most popular tents used on trail, especially for distance hikers. This one is the lightest of these 3 options. It is an amazingly light tent. But again, this is a end entry tent where you have to crawl in it on your hands and knees. And if you're trying to put 2 people in a tent like that, that becomes an issue during the middle of the night when someone has to, get up because they're literally crawling over your head to get out of the tent, or crawling over your feet, whichever way you want to lay. So this is, again, one of those reasons why I definitely prefer a side entry tent over the end entry tents. But yeah, Hornet, Copper Spur, Fly Creek, all excellent tents.
All right. The next is, I have to say it, sleeping bag or quilt, and recommendations.
Sure. Quilt. I mean, 100%. And again, I know we talked about this back a few episodes ago. I was the toughest convert from quilts to sleeping bags. I honestly can't even think of a position. I mean, if I was in -20, -30 degree temperatures, which does happen sometimes, I might consider using a sleeping bag at that point. But honestly, other than that, quilts are 100% the way to go. Some of the best in the business out there right now. And again, I know that we have also talked about it before. Quilt companies are backed up. Just absolutely crazy backed up. So hopefully, with this being a slower summer for everybody right now, there's not a lot of people spending money. We're not going to talk about it, but let's virus stuff. Hopefully, a lot of these quilt companies can take this opportunity to kind of catch up and get themselves back on track. But Jacks Are Better, the Jacks Are Better Hudson River 20 degree quilt, amazing quilt. Anything from UGQ, anything from Cedar Ridge, I definitely prefer down over synthetic. Costs you a little bit more, but it takes up less space in your pack, and it also weighs less too. So yeah, quilts for sure.
Sleeping pad.
This is a fun one too. The number one pad, I think, on the face of the planet for the last few years has been the Thermarest Neo Air X Lite. Amazing pad. Absolutely amazing pad. There are some people that worry about, or that complain about it being a little bit too loud. I say if it's too loud, you're just a super light sleeper, or you're just a really, really crazy sleeper. Because when it comes to crazy sleeping, I rule the roost there. I sleep on my stomach, my back, my side. I mean, knee out this way, knee out that way, 2 knees out, fetal position. I mean, you name it, I will hit that position every single night. And I have never once had a problem with the Neo Air pads being too loud. The flip side of that, the Neo Air X Lite is the yellow one that everybody knows about. The flip side of that is the Neo Air X Therm, which is a insulated sleeping pad for colder weather temperatures, or dare I say, most women, because they all seem to sleep cold.
Here we go again. Here we go.
I know. I'm just out for trouble. Also, Thermarest, saying in line with them, they have a new pad out this year called the Uber Light. And I am just not a fan. This is one of these absolutely newfangled things where they went, their number one goal was to have the lightest inflatable sleeping pad on earth. And they definitely accomplished that. But this thing is not very durable at all. And the cost is still way, way, way up there because it is a brand new item. So you're looking at $200 for this thing, and it is paper thin. So personally, I have slept on one. I will not use it. There's just no reason for me to gamble with that much money. This year myself, I will be using the Nemo Tensor sleeping pad, and I am super excited about this one. Like I said, again, I'm a fairly decent sized guy, 6'1", 200 pounds. This thing has a ton of loft. It is a rectangular pad, so I don't have to feel like my feet are falling off, or I don't have to feel like I'm actually rolling off of it. It's more of a squared off type pad as opposed to those Thermarest pads that we just spoke about. Those ones I tend to kind of roll off of, but once I have the consciousness to realize I'm in a tent, I'm on a rounded off sleeping pad, I can kind of keep myself glued to it throughout the night. But yeah, no, when it comes to this Nemo, this thing is comfortable as all get out. And the flip side of that one, really, really quick, I'm using the Nemo Cosmo insulated pad this year too for my colder weather adventures.
Now, this next one, some people might consider a luxury item. I no longer consider it a luxury item. It is part of my pack, and you carry 2 of them. So, pillow.
Yes, I I do. Yes, I actually carry 2 pillows with me. So yeah, for those of you that think you can do it without a pillow, Good for you. That's awesome. If you want to roll up your hoodie or your t-shirt or whatever and use that as a pillow, more power to you. I absolutely cannot. Yeah, not only do I carry one pillow, I carry two. The Sea to Summit Eros pillow, an absolutely amazing pillow, one of the most popular ones out there. The deal with this one is that it costs, $35-$40. It's not cheap. And for someone like me who carries two of them, we're definitely getting up there and the money. This is where, and I know that you and I talked about this a bit before. I'm not trying to plug anything. I'm not trying to plug anybody. When it comes to any of this gear, the backpacking gear flea market is a great place to stop first. Like I said, again, the Nemo Hornet 2-person tent, right now that's a $399 tent plus $59 or $49 for the actual factory footprint. I picked mine up in the flea market with the footprint for $260, brand spanking new, factory wrapped up, never been set up, never anything. So this is one of those places one of those times where it actually is good, especially if you're trying to save $1. Check out the backpacking gear flea market. And again, this gets into the pillows. I personally have a favorite pillow of mine. It comes from a kind of like a mom and pop gear shop that decided to have their own pillow made. And I have sold literally over 4,000 of these things, and they're only like $16. So for the money that you,
if I'm thinking of the one you're talking about, I bought one out of the flea market last summer. It is amazing.
Yeah. And again, I mean, this is just one of those super lucky finds for me. It's a product that I found that costs half as much as what the brand name retailer would charge for it. And yeah, I've used mine for like 150 nights now. And it is just, it's honestly the most comfortable pillow I have ever used. And it's only $16. So yeah, I mean, when it comes to that, it might be a benefit as far as money savings. Stretch out a little bit, do a little bit of, research. Don't just necessarily walk into REI and pull out your old, credit card and say, take it. But yeah.
What's the name of that pillow? I can't remember.
Well, it is actually from it's kind of a mom and pop dealio. They just made up their own brand name. It's a Wilderness, or we call it Wildy, Wildy Technology pillow.
That's right.
Those come in 4 or 5 different colors, which is kind of fun. They only weigh 3 ounces. So again, it's very, very comparable as far as size, comfort, weight to the Sea to Summit Eros pillow. It's just a little less than half the price. So for a person like me, I can buy 2 for the price of 1. I love that.
That's right. Okay, cook system.
Yes, again, this honestly, just if you're going out solo, or if you're going out with multiple people, if you're going out solo and you're not cooking anything drastic, when I say drastic, if you're cooking something that needs to be boiled for 8, 10, 12 minutes, again, if you're trying to like boil spaghetti to the point where you're taking raw spaghetti and having to actually boil it to, cook it, this might not be the best stove for you. But the BRS 3000T, amazing stove, 0.9 ounces. It weighs less than 1 ounce. A super amazing stove. It is made out of titanium, which means it's not the strongest material ever, and it does not stand up to heat for super long periods of time. So if you're just boiling 1 cup, 2 cups of water to hydrate your Mountain House meals or whatever, that is an amazing stove that weighs nothing. If you're going a little bit bigger, or if you want something that is a little bit more durable, the MSR Pocket Rocket. And then my absolute favorite stove ever is the Optimus Crux Lite. Between the Pocket Rocket and that Crux Lite, you're in the $35-$40 range, up to $45. You can always find those on sale. On the flip side of that, the BRS, which is the lightest stove I've ever used, only costs about $20. You can actually find those for a little bit less too. So excellent deal there for the money. You just don't want to work it too hard.
And what pot are you carrying?
I am carrying the Toaks 750 milliliter pot with lid. If it's just a really quick overnighter, I will carry the Toaks 550 pot. But I really like the 750. Not only does it give me enough room to boil 2 full cups of water, it also gives me about a half an inch of clearance. So just in case I'm not staring at it and the thing starts to boil, it's not going to blow the lid off and boil over and get everything messy. So yeah, the 750.
Perfect. I didn't hear you say the jet boil, so I'm kind of disappointed.
Okay.
All
So
right, let's
really
not go
quick.
there. Let's not
No,
go there. Okay.
no, we can. That's
I
for
carry
sure.
the jet boil. Steve has given me grief for it. So there you go. And now the listeners are going to give me grief for it. But hey, it is what it is.
That's because when Julie hikes, she hikes with two completely invisible people that eat a lot of food. So she feels like she needs to carry a jet boil with her to cook or to boil enough water for everybody.
It's my safety net. I can't help it. All right. All right, let's go. Do you do pack cover, pack liner?
I do a pack liner usually. Of course, I've lived out in Utah for the last 4 or 5 years, and it doesn't rain, so I really hadn't had to worry about it too much. But now that I'm back here on the East Coast, that becomes a definite issue. I use again ULA packs. 9 times out of 10, my pack is made from X-Pack material, which is a waterproof material. That does not mean that your backpack is going to be 100% waterproof because there's still seams and zippers and places where water can get in. So I use a pack liner. And again, this is kind of one of those things. There are a few different ways that you can go about it. C2 Summit makes a really good pack liner. You can find Cuban fiber or Dyneema composite fiber pack liners out there. Or this is, again, one of those situations where I have found an amazing product and I'm able to sell it a lot cheaper than what you're going to find some of the other alternatives from bigger names. I can sell 55-liter pack liners. They're actually roll top dry bags that are 50, 55 liters, and they fit most major manufacturers' backpacks. And these, I mean, I can get these in your hands for like $20. And that's so much better than paying $45, $50 for one of the higher end pack liners. And yeah, you really have nothing to gain in this piece of gear by spending so much money. There are cheaper alternatives out there that are just as efficient.
And what about stuff sacks? I know some people carry stuff sacks, some people don't. Once they put everything in their liner, are you a stuff sack kind of guy or just depends?
I do use a couple usually. Again, especially living here in the East where it just rains so much over here. It's crazy. So yeah, I have come into the whole stuff sack situation, and I do use a couple. Yeah, I use one for electronics. I use one for my headlamp, for my power brick, for any charging cords that I might have, for anything along those lines. And then I also have another one that I keep separate for my toilet kit, my first aid kit, my tent repair kit, and just kind of other things like that that I would rather keep dry. If I know for a fact that I'm getting into some pretty inclement weather, I will actually take a completely separate stuff sack. And when I say stuff sack, I'm talking like roll top dry bags. These are what I use for my quilt, because keeping your down quilt is a lifesaver. Again, C2 Summit on those, or come and see me. I've got 5-liter, 10-liter, 30-liter, 50-liter. And like I said, the 50-liter is great for a pack cover. Some of those smaller ones are great for quilts or great for electronics. Like I said, power bricks, solar power banks, whatever you need.
Perfect. And the last thing that I'll have you speak of, and I've actually ordered 2 of these from you, and I just got one in the mail, and I love it because it actually sits down inside of my Fulton pack perfectly. It's actually a bear bag or a food bag, but it's also, I consider it a dry bag. So talk to us about that food bag that you sell on the backpacking gear flea market site, because I love that thing.
Sure. We're going to go right back to ULA. I love talking about them. This is a brand new product from ULA. It is a food bag. It's about a 12 to 13 liter roll top food bag. And we call these food bags and not necessarily stuff sacks because they are made with VX21 or VX25 X-Pack material. X-Pack is exponentially stronger than most of the most common used materials for dry bags. These are meant to be rolled down. You can clip them together. They have a little miniature carabiner with them. You can hang these from trees to keep the bears away, to keep the rodents, the coons, the mice, whatever. It's an extremely durable material, and these are 100% waterproof. So if you are in, say, North Carolina, where the bears are out and about quite often, You can hang your food bag full of food in a tree as long as you hang it properly. You have no worries of anything getting into it. And no matter how much it'll rain that night, you will wake up to a dry food bag.
And I can attest to this food bag. I mean, I have one that is bright orange and I love it. And I just ordered one that is all black and I love it already, although I haven't used it. So, I mean, Steve, just in this alone, you have given us a tremendous amount of information. And what I'm going to make sure happens is we are going to put all of this in the show notes. We are going to identify the brands, put links in there for people because people have been asking for it. And some of the things that we didn't talk about are like electronics, first aid, clothing, the good old trail runners, boots, socks. We have touched on these subjects in different episodes, and I'm going to consider those I call those additional personal items. But I will ask, before we get off here, talk about your power brick and what you use to charge your electronics when you're out on the trail.
I use the Anchor 10,000 milliamp. You can usually pick these up just about anywhere, either $24.99 or $29.99. They do go on sale for $25 a few times every year. And actually what I have found is I own 2 of those as opposed to the Anchor 20,000, only because they weigh the same. So you're really not saving any weight by buying a 20,000 as opposed to 2 10,000s. The big benefit of this is the 10,000, which is the smaller, lighter one. It will charge my phone. I have a Samsung Galaxy phone. It will charge my phone like 3 times. So if I'm just out for a weekend, I can just take one 10,000 milliamp with me. If I go out for a longer trip, I will take 2 10,000 milliamps with me as opposed to just taking one 20,000. Having 2 of them just seems to make things so much easier. Again, it doesn't weigh any less, so I'm not really saving anything. But if I need to have one attached to my phone, I don't have this big 1-pound brick attached to my phone to keep her, charged up. Also, another benefit of this is if you are pulling into a hostel or an area where you're going to be around a bunch of other hikers, you're not hogging up the electricity for 2, 3, 4, 7 hours trying to charge up this big monster power brick that's going to last you a whole week. You can just pop in, get your 10,000 charged up, and get out of the way. But yeah, I mean, honestly, even here around the house on a everyday basis, I don't plug my cell phone into the wall. I don't plug my cell phone into a wireless charger. I use Anchor 10,000 power bricks, and that is honest to God's truth. Those things are everywhere. I use them all day, every day.
Well, Steve, this has been a wealth of information for this episode. I'm excited to get this out there. I'm excited to get the list out there, exactly what people have been asking for. So thanks again, Steve, for chatting with us. And please, everybody, go check out specifically the Backpacking Gear Flea Market page. I'm telling you right now, there are some deals to be had on some brand new gear that people just aren't using. I'll list everything in the show notes. So it's always accessible and we can refer to it from now on as we are recording. Again, thanks everybody for listening. Be safe out there and happy section hiking.
I'm wondering if you'd go wandering with me through the wilderness and woods to where the winds are blowing free. Through the darkness of the night, heading toward the morning light. I wonder if you'd wander with me. And I'll spread the word, and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come. And we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, head over the river. You're wondering if I go wandering with you, what kind of trouble we'll get ourselves into. Would it be wrong to tag along with a band of vagabonds? You wonder if I'd wander with you. So I'll spread the word and you beat the drum. round up the troops and get the gang to come. And we'll leave the streets in these neighborhoods, head over the river and through the woods. I'm wondering if you'd come wandering my way, if you ever get lost or if the trail leads you astray. The music of the pack can always bring you back. I wonder, can we wander away? And I'll spread the word and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come. And we'll leave the streets in these neighborhoods, head over the river and through the woods.
O'Reilly! It's Superstart Battery Month at O'Reilly Auto Parts. Get up to a $25 gift card after rebate with the purchase of select Superstart batteries. Our professional parts people will test your old battery for free and recommend the right battery for your vehicle. For power, performance, and reliability, choose Superstart batteries only at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.